Good day, viewers, and welcome to another show of the News Behind the News with Ralph and Tab, right here on Mix 94.7 FM. And today I'm joined with a very special guest, and that is none other than Member of Parliament, Ms. Sarah Wescot Williams. Welcome to the program. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, Ralph.
Okay, great. So, this program, the News Behind the News, as I let you know a little bit earlier, is basically where I think our population is in need of information that is broken down, that is made simple.
So true.
And someone like yourself who has a vast knowledge of experience, a person I personally like to speak to,
Thank
because
you.
of course we get to learn from the years of experience that you have, but also even as a current member of parliament, there's a lot that's happening in our nation,
Yes.
and I think more information, more elaborations are necessary. But before we get into some of the meat of the matter, my first question for you is, as a veteran and one who has been in government during both good and bad times, what will you say are the key components of leadership, particularly where it concerns leading an organization?
I think you sort of hit the nail on the head in terms of stressing through good times and bad times. And leadership, generally speaking, is about continuity, not kind of trying to change your leadership skills because of the change in circumstances per se, and I stress per se, but realize the ups and downs. And I think the old cliche in terms of the only constant is change, and right now you see that so rapidly.
Mhm.
So, in terms of leadership, I think that politically speaking, leadership takes on added dimensions. Added dimensions because the political sphere, while we talk about, and I'm sure you have done a lot of study in terms of leadership, and we talk about training and getting young persons involved, be the kind of leader that people actually would want to follow you, set the right example. But in politics, Ralph, that takes on slightly different twists, and especially again in the field that I have led in for so many years, you need to be very, very cognizant of that field that you are in and that you are a leader. Again, I stress, in politics, it is different. It is, yeah, and leading is different in politics as well.
True. And so on the flip side to that same question is where, so leading an organization is one, but where governing is concerned, governing a nation, what can you see as well
Yeah.
with that in that regard?
A former colleague of mine, and I will mention his name, um, Mr. Michael Ferrier. And when he first joined politics
Mhm.
and started to be part of government,
Mhm.
he used to be so frustrated with the fact that comparing governance with business, and he would so often say, in business this would never happen. And I stress that to say that, governing a nation, that's a totally different cup of tea. I mean, you're talking about your country, you're
Mhm.
talking about the well-being and having responsibility for your country, for your community,
Mhm.
that consists of, so I'm not even talking different individuals, that for sure, but so many different components, parts and segments.
Mhm.
And you need to the best of your ability, balance your decisions based on that. And it is not easy. Many different interests and concerns are, come into play.
Mhm. Indeed. Okay. And so, one of the situations we're faced with right now, not just right now, but I think has been strained now more than ever, is our relationship with the Netherlands.
Yeah.
As far, when I look back, I kind of look at it from since the moment when the former Minister Plasterk,
Yeah.
when he gave Sebastian an instruction to implement the screening process. I think from that moment, and I could be wrong, we really noticed a downward trend where our relationship with the Netherlands is concerned. And from there, we had an integrity chamber issue that took several months of a spin, let's say. And then following that, Hurricane Irma and the monies that we were supposed to receive or what we did receive. And then worse yet, COVID. And so, going back into your experience, what can you say? What is it like, basically, when it comes to negotiating with the Netherlands?
At the end of the day, Ralph,
Mhm.
it all, especially in this sphere,
Mhm.
it all remains politics and politicians. And
Okay.
with this, I mean,
Mhm.
if we look at the Netherlands and you look at how politics have gone and politicians
Mhm.
have changed, the whole political landscape and environment
Mhm.
has changed. So because the fact that a former minister Plaster
Mhm.
could have used a particular passage in our charter
Mhm.
to force through, amongst other things, that particular instruction.
Mhm.
Because remember, Ralph, the charter has been there with all its feats and flaws. It has been there, but as the politics between the Netherlands
Mhm.
and the countries became closer in the sense of they watching us more closely.
Mhm.
We too, because you would often hear some politicians on this side say, yeah, but they're accusing us of this and that,
Yeah.
but look at what's happening
Yeah,
over there.
yeah.
So that
Was it?
closeness, and suddenly you had where many politicians and political parties in the Netherlands felt burdened by the countries over here,
Mhm.
and felt burdened by the fact that actually we are autonomous, could do what we want,
Mhm. Mhm.
and but at the end of the day, they might be not only called to pay, but they might be called to give account on an international forum.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you saw where matters like our charter started to be used much more and much more strict than it used to be before.
Mhm.
So where you saw whenever it came to an instruction, for example, and in the case of Mr. Plastic and that particular instruction, because there, yes, that one was deep,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they use an article in the charter that for as long as I have been in politics, and that's quite some decades, that has been an issue.
Mhm.
And how it is used, because it is sort of open-ended, depends on one, the relationship. So if we're knocking heads, then definitely the first chance they get, they will, and I'm now talking the Dutch political establishment,
Gotcha.
will use that Article 43, and there's so much talked about guarantee function. And if you want to build something around the guarantee function for good governance, imagine you can create a story around, be it the screening of ministers, be it, for example, not appointing ministers in due time, and those kind of things. And once they got the feel, once the Dutch political establishment got the feel of using their representative, our governor,
Mhm.
as the gatekeeper, if I can call it that, and the executor of this Article 43. Once that ball started to roll, it couldn't be stopped. And the same thing in with the integrity chamber, because remember, then they started to threaten also with an instruction again. In fact, they had an instruction drafted.
Yeah.
If you don't do it, we're going to do it. And again,
Yeah.
if you want to build an integrity chamber, you can find arguments to say, well, St. Martin, you have neglected this part of good governance, and we have to step in.
Yeah.
We have to give that guarantee
Yeah.
and fix it.
Yeah, because there was, even at that time, there was also about, what, 3 integrity reports?
Yes, yes.
With a span of, what, a year, I
Yeah,
think it was?
yeah. And at that time, because I was in the midst of it, I was prime minister at the time, and yeah, and you know, Ralph, and I think right now we find ourselves in a similar position, and I'll tell you what a comparison is. Yeah, we had a lot of issues. We had issues in governance, you know, our yearly accounts. You had issues in government-owned companies.
Yeah.
It was a lot of talk, and the question is, okay, so what exactly is it? Where is the pain in terms of needing to address these issues? And so St. Martin itself was one of them who we had our own integrity report done with recommendations. We asked St. Martin, asked Transparency International to do an integrity report, and then the Dutch government didn't take any of that into consideration. They had their own done as well. But the question, and that's why I compare with now, Ralph, is what did we do with the recommendations, and how quickly did we do anything at all?
Yeah.
And that's where you see where our political system comes into play. And calling a spade, you know, the way that government can and has been changed, and the lack of continuity when you have those changes.
Yeah. Because then you also question how necessary is it, particularly because we have those institutions like, let's say, the SED,
General Audit Chamber, yes.
General Audit Chamber is in mind. And, you know, other Council of State, even lesser organizations in terms of, let's say, even the Chamber of Commerce that has the ability to provide government with recommendations, whether requested or just whether they choose to do so. So now you get this added structures that kind of basically try to do the same thing, and you ask yourself then, does what we have, is it necessary? Not that if it's necessary, but is it necessary to add something on top of it because we have those structures in place? But then I guess the argument will be, well, we sat on it for years and recommendations are not taken, whether, you know, times have passed or governments have changed. So in what way then do we set up a necessary, like a barrier, not to keep out Holland, because you know, where our structure is concerned, they do have a say in what takes place in St. Martin, but prevent unnecessarily trampling of our autonomy.
Yeah. You know, and Ralph, I have this entire, our current political situation has kept me very occupied in terms of, okay, where are we really at, and where are we going? And I think we lack a combined and supported vision for St. Martin going forward. And we honestly lack that, and I think that is why we do not appear as strong as we can appear.
Correct.
We do not, and so let's take the council of advice. The council of advice, as you mentioned, can give advice. Government can ask, they can give it out of their own will, and they have to advise on any draft legislation, to mention one item. But they do that, and the government and the parliament, by the way, because together we decide on laws, can not only disregard that advice, but they can do differently. You know, and when that happens, and you can't motivate it well, why you're not in agreement with it, then again, to me it weakens our position. And if as a government you don't have that strong position, and nowhere, again, in my opinion, right now, is that lack of coordination more visible in government circles than with the in the relationship with the Netherlands, because we're not clear, Ralph. We're absolutely not clear what it is we want to do and where we want to go. We're sending so many different signals where that relationship is concerned, rather than taking the bull by the horn and saying it's either A and B. I'm either going to sit with you, the Netherlands, and discuss the issues that we are having in this relationship, or we're saying we had enough of that and we're leaving. But this trying to kind of go around it, I think that again is weakening our position as a nation.
And as the first Prime Minister of St. Martin, what would you say were some of the key challenges the island had in setting up government administration?
The challenge was especially with those departments and ministries that St. Martin did not have before for their responsibility. Yeah. And I think the whole tax and monetary system, so we take over the complete tax system, as well as justice. Those two areas were areas, that albeit on paper you work out a structure, but putting it into practice, bringing two completely different work cultures in to one was also a massive undertaking, because remember we had we had a whole organization that belonged to the central government here on St. Martin, and then you had the local government, not only in terms of people but also with the different laws. We had different tax laws on both levels. Justice was a complete new issue for us. So I think that process there, bringing that all together, placing civil servants, making it one system out of those two systems, that was quite challenging and required a lot of work.
Okay, I see. And one of the things I would like to go back to, in our conversations, particularly speaking about kingdom relations, is a matter of conditions that we, and how do we work with that? How do we move past having to constantly want to initiate our development, but you're faced with conditions that change, increase, and what do you say that is even justifiable?
And Ralph, that is why earlier I said that because of us not being clear and upfront in terms of what we want of this relationship, if anything at all. We're not being clear about that. And when I mentioned earlier, it weakens us. Let's go back to the matter of conditions and whatever else have you. For a long while, the government of St. Martin found itself in this sort of a cat and mouse situation with the Dutch government. Today we have this so-called country package, and I keep saying, Ralph, I say to anyone who wants to listen, I say to my colleagues in Parliament, this particular country package program going towards the COHO is going to change the way we do business in government and in Parliament. And we need to face that and decide how you're going to get a democratic system, so a parliament controlling a government, when you have this kind of organization somewhere there in between. So this going back to how this was coming about. So we had the issue following Irma in terms of the Dutch putting this money, and this was not where we are today in terms of loans and what have you. Put the money into it. They, because of the frequent, but Holland, you want to dictate for me, you're not being fair. They used the argument, the Netherlands used the argument of the World Bank to say, okay, we put in an independent institution. We ourselves we're not going to be your counterpart in this. But put an institution, Ralph, that up until today, the government of St. Martin has a problem keeping up with. And in the beginning, what you realize is that we could not deliver. We could not deliver what we had to do in time for the process to continue. So, and again, you see where that mistrust is very, very strong to such an extent in some circles on St. Martin that, I think you have those persons who feel but are not coming out and not coming out and saying it, feeling that, we should not be in the kingdom. And my thing is, again, if there are political parties and or factions who feel that the matter of our political status is an important one to be addressed now, let's be open and candid and say we want to address it now. If you had to ask me then, MP, what's your position? I think for right now, there are many more pressing and hot issues that we need to solve for this country. But once you take that position, which means that you have to operate within the system that we're in now, and operating in there, if you're fighting, if you're boxing, if you're trying to get at the other person through a little backdoor type of a action, it's not going to work, and it's just going to frustrate the process even more.
Yeah, because what he says, to me, simply sounds like Pilate, washing his hands from the verdict of deciding whether Jesus should be killed or not. But also, I guess it makes it even more difficult of a choice because, the question is, should I just stay in this system which I have problems with, or should we call for another referendum, kind of not necessarily pause what's taking place, but determine, will we go it alone? And is that something that we should put forward now? I mean, especially.
And I think that's Sorry, Raf.
No, I was just saying with a decade basically passing since 10. Should we call for a referendum?
And that's a question. And I advocated before 2020 that 2020 would have been a good time to basically look at the past decade of Country St. Martin. Look at it in a very objective way. The fact is, I understand that we couldn't do that, Ralph. We couldn't do it. The whole COVID situation that basically had everyone. But I think we still need to assess, like, okay, what do we have, and how is it functioning? I mean, we're talking 10 years, and rather than this kind of little piecemeal, type of operation, the whole decolonization, and okay, what, and my question is, and I've said it before, Ralph, I think even in speaking to you, so do the proponents of decolonization see this as a way to get a new status, but within the kingdom, a status where, for example, this Article 43 and the governor are no longer there? Is that what we are trying to achieve? Then you need to sit with the same ones who you see what I'm saying? So for me, it's important to know, what do we really want? What do we want? Generally speaking, with our status, what do we want with this decolonization drive? Do we want to shame the Netherlands, shame the kingdom, and feel that that's going to make them act differently? Or we want to? That's the thing, Because, it's a difficult time to be having that discussion when on one hand you're actually with your hand out, and they're coming with all the conditions that according to them to safeguard their funds, and it's their taxpayer. These are, and the arguments, but they're right.
Yeah, because another thing that comes to mind is, all right, if let's say we put off a referendum next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, but we focus maybe perhaps on electoral reform. Something that in the last decade it has been among many hot button topics, but no real work, towards. So it's like, what? Because then, what do we do? What do we do?
It is so true, and I keep saying this because when you really look at it, I don't think there is a political party in the last election and maybe even the one before that has not mentioned the need to have some kind of stability
Yeah.
in government.
Yeah.
No political party has not mentioned that.
Yeah.
But when it comes now to doing something to ensure that, and we go back to this article of dissolving parliament and the government and the motion that the fact that parliament can issue motions against the government and then the government tries to act first, we haven't addressed that. That still remains
Correct.
the same,
Yeah.
the same way. And there are other matters that electoral reform, I mean, in parliament, I initiated a committee specifically to deal with that. The government is saying they're doing something, so, and
Yeah, because so for example, one of the things that the discussion, let's say, that I personally have had and I've heard as well, is probably changing the way in which you are elected. So, so instead of um, the party being on to accumulate the seats, it would be rather the top 15 vote getters themselves, because opposed to, let's say, UD getting five seats, and then it's the top
five
in the UD, it will be the top five
yeah.
in the whole candidates.
Right.
And then how do you go about making
exactly and the
making that change?
So there are two things. You have our political system. You have our electoral system. That's the way our persons are elected. There have been much talk and several proposals to change that, our electoral system itself. Then there are other matters that affect our functioning, our governing, and it's because of our electoral system. And you want to address those. You want to address those matters as well. One of the so right now, and it tends to be. It's definitely within the Dutch Kingdom, and maybe even beyond that. That what you're seeing is much more personalized politics.
Yeah.
The party structure is still part of the formal structure, but in practice, you're seeing much more of a personalized politics. And then the question would be, indeed, do you then just elect some persons who gave a good message, and those together would then be responsible, and not necessarily with the whole party thing behind it? Right now, our system is a sort of I don't even want to call it a hybrid, because it's not like a good thing. It's like a break off. And why do I say this? Parties are the focus up until that person or those persons get elected to parliament. Then the party as a body doesn't really have much to say at all. So unless you have people in the party, in your parliament and in your government who value the party organization and who will be feeding back and hearing from their members, etc., you got a situation where once in there, it's a total different ball game.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna take a quick break, and we'll be right back. And welcome back, everyone. You're tuned into the news behind the news with Ralph Kintyre right here on Mix 94.7 FM, and I'm joined with none other than MP Sarah Wescot Williams. So basically, we last spoke about the need or the possibilities of electoral reform, and as well as kingdom relations with St. Martin and the Netherlands. And as we continue on that, one of the things that took place not too long ago was the IPCO, which took place in Bonaire. And one of the key items, besides the decolonization topic, was also the kingdom, the dispute regulation.
Yes.
And so can you break that down a bit, and why is that such a necessary topic?
And the dispute regulation is mandated in our charter. With that I mean the charter establishes in Article 12A that there should be a regulation that governs how parties and partners in the kingdom deal with disputes.
Mhm.
So it took a while before anything happened in terms of proposing, initiating this regulation. That would be a dispute regulation. And there were different attempts by members, especially in the second chamber, to come with something, for a dispute regulation. And but then, like starting in 2015, the matter became a constant topic for the IPCO. Discussions back and forth, Ralph. Every IPCO, dispute regulation. What should it be? How can it be? And I was one of those persons who was very elated when the four parliaments, so the Dutch, St. Martin, Curaçao, and Aruba, agreed on the points of departure for this dispute regulation. It was a big thing because actually IPCO has no formal status. So it's not as if a decision of IPCO carries any weight then for the parties. If we say on St. Martin we'll do this, that you do it, but it carries no formal weight. So that was a big thing. And when we had even the three Caribbean countries were mostly on the same page where this is concerned. But to have the Dutch first and second chambers, because both are represented at the IPCO, join you, come out with a declaration and forcing especially the Dutch government to do something, to prepare something for a dispute regulation. And so everyone was happy, and there was a draft law. The Dutch government was sort of resisting even their own parliaments to do something about a dispute regulation. At the end of the day, we get a draft, and it was sent to the second chamber, and they approved it. But the constant thread in all of the discussions, Ralph, was that there should be three main components in this dispute regulation. One, it should regard legal disputes, like constitutional disputes. So not everything, if our prime minister and the prime minister there get an issue, and then you're going to put it up for the dispute regulation. So it was, judicial/constitutional disputes. That was one thing. The next thing was that the dispute should be handled by an independent entity. So not to say, well, okay, that's clear. Independent entity. And thirdly, that it should be binding. So in every meeting, those three components kept coming back because the four parliaments had agreed to these three components. However, when it was passed in the second chamber, the matter of binding was not approved. It was not incorporated. And although it ended up saying for the king, because what's the issue of binding here? Binding means that if there is a dispute and we get an entity to look at it and say what their advice is, give their advice, that should be heeded. So if the dispute says, if St. Martin takes a dispute to this entity and they say to the kingdom government, you are wrong, you can't put an instruction on the screening of ministers, then the kingdom government would have to accept that advice. But the kingdom government was very, very reluctant to let that be part of it. So they formulated it to say only in very extraordinary cases can you deviate, but they did not bring it down to say binding is binding. Yeah. If they say that, that's what goes. So the second chamber accepted a draft of a dispute regulation. We had a law. We had the law, but it needed to, of course, be ratified by the first chamber. And there was a long period of time between those two. And the countries kept asking, first chamber, when are you going to handle this? When are you going to finish this? And the first chamber started to ask the government questions. And then the government, I'm talking kingdom government, eventually said to the first chamber, well, it makes no sense because we still received resistance from the three Caribbean countries on this matter. and they actually pulled back the draft. So right now, Ralph, we have nothing. In IPCO, it was decided that the parliaments, each parliament, would encourage their governments to come with a new draft. I have been pondering this process and to myself wondering if we had let as countries the dispute regulation go for what it was. So not having the exact binding part in it, at least you would have had a dispute regulation. You would have made some steps forward. Right now, we're back to the beginning. Looking at how long it took to reach a consensus, I have my doubts that we will see a dispute regulation in the coming. I don't want to pin a time, but definitely it's going to take another long time. And again, Ralph, coming back to what we discussed earlier, you're seeing the changed politics on both sides of the ocean, but especially in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
You know, formally, and it ties into where you actually started out in the program here. What has really changed? And it had a lot to do with the persons, the politicians, the relationship between the politicians on both sides, you know, and as those relationships and those positions hardened, which we have seen, and you still have it very much in the Netherlands,
Yeah.
And I fear that we can have we sit down, we pound the table, but at the end of the day, okay, guys, we got to get out of this, rather than this.
Bottleneck.
Yes,
There's a lot of work
I
left to
keep
be done.
I keep telling myself, I say, you know, if we had gone with what we had on the table, at least you had somewhere to take your disputes. And then we'll get up. When we reach that bridge in terms of the kingdom government saying, yeah, but notwithstanding that advice, I will decide. Otherwise, then your fight, for the lack of a better word, then that's where your fight would be. Oh no, you can't. You know, that's not important enough for you to take an advice different, or to take a decision different than the advice that you got. But right now we have nothing.
Yeah.
We have nothing.
Yeah.
You know, so and but the majority of the parliaments felt this was the way to go, but I have my doubts that it's going to be solved soon, and then on every issue we're going to be having, whether it be for Curacao, Aruba, or St. Martin, we're going to be having this knocking heads between the Caribbean country and the kingdom government.
Yeah, because I have to go back to, I guess, a giant of the day, which is the COHO. One of the things that we also have, and that has also received much backlash throughout its existence, is a CFT. Which, of course, even recently issued another report. So moving forward, do you even see that body still being necessary, and how has their role, would you say, benefited St. Martin?
You know, Ralph, I have not seen the new draft of the COHO in its entirety. So we had the COHO, the way it was drafted, the objection to it, the Council of States objection, our Council of Advice objection, and then you had where the governments, we're talking governments of the countries, so CNOPS and the three countries got together and so-called came up with a softening of the COHO the way it was, because according to everybody, this was really infringing on our autonomy. But what I'm understanding, and again, I need to see it all in context. So from Article 1 to the last one, I need to see everything. But from what I'm understanding, where a sort of a financial mandate was given to the COHO itself, so so to do certain financial checks, etc., that now the CFT is going to be strengthened with that part for the COHO responsibilities. Now, if we look at, from the very beginning, Ralph, I said, one, our country package, because of the dilly-dallying on St. Martin, what we really got for a country package was more copy and paste than anything, because the country package was already decided. Ours is nearly a carbon copy of Aruba and Curacao, maybe a little thing here, and they get them to add in the French side, but we all under this one umbrella for a country package to start with. We were not part of the discussion about the content of the country package. That was already designed and there, and then the slap on St. Martin on too.
Hand it to you to
exactly.
Okay.
And then so then you have that. That's your country package. Then this is going to be sort of controlled by the COHO, and then you have these implementation agendas. So when I look at the implementation agenda, I like, really, if you expect that exactly.
Yeah.
If you expect that the things that are in the implementation package could be executed in the time that you have there, then it's one of two things. It's either not going to happen, or St. Martin will have absolutely no say in preparing plans of approach, for example. And other technocrats are going to be doing the work for us.
Yeah.
Because we don't have the resource, and we like to say, no, we're going to do it. We're going to do the review and the quick scan, but we don't have the resources to do it, especially not in the kind of time frame. So every time now, they are adjusting the implementation agendas. Oh, because that was much too ambitious. This was, but I mean, you could have foreseen it.
And then that's where you have that democratic deficit.
Yeah, exactly. You could have foreseen it. So now all eyes are directed on what is going to be the COHO, the new COHO structure, so to speak, but it still remains, and as I said, and they say, okay, COHO is not going to have anything to do with your finances per se, but we're going to put it with the CFT, and then I'm like, okay, so what does that mean? If you look at the authority and competencies that right now the CFT has where our budget is concerned, right? Yeah. And then if you tie that in with your implementation agenda, for which the great part needs to come out of our own funding on St. Martin, we are going to lose control of that process of deciding what and how it happens on St. Martin. To me, there is no other way. Honestly, to me, there is no other way. So you're going to get dictating how it should happen, but we need to. So Ralph, our whole budget will turn around the implementation agenda. Our whole budget will turn around the implementation agenda. Because that's now your structure. So with all the nice programs and visions that that we hear about,
that is basically So it's the national development
vision and all of those things.
Program. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah,
it's where it's turned to.
Yeah.
And then we have
exactly,
to see
and
kind of budget which we should be receiving. Very shortly as well. So.
Yeah, we hope to and see
telling.
And that exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
I have a question. The CFT, to my knowledge, it was supposed to be temporary, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, it is to be evaluated.
Okay.
It is to be they're different things. Depending on how the country performs financially, then certain criteria would no longer be necessary. So that's one thing. So depending on how you do financially, if you got, for example, a budget balanced budget for 3 years, then you don't have to meet those particular criteria, and then you have to have an evaluation done of the functioning of the kingdom law for the CFT. And up until now, every time they have been able to report that we're not up to par, we're not where we should be, for them no longer to be. And now what we're seeing with the whole
10 years now.
Yeah, exactly. And what you're seeing with the whole COHO thing is that the position is being strengthened.
Yeah.
So some time ago, I asked about the evaluation that should be taking place now, but that's in actuality that's a moot issue. That's a moot issue.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the things I guess, at least to me, is not as clear is, okay, so we have a country package which was put into place, but what forms that or gives the Netherlands that legal ability to say you have to implement this?
Mhm.
Is it something that is part of our kingdom charter that like
No,
so like
no.
can they just on a whim decide I ain't like what you're doing, here's some guidelines and you're gonna do it? Like,
Well. Actually, and and that's why we're not being clear. You get a country package, and so-called this country package
mhm,
was agreed to by all parties because everybody agreed to reform. And St. Martin is saying, yeah, oh, yeah, we have been talking about our tax reform, for example, our social security reform,
yeah,
even
they
our
were planned
education
before.
reform.
Yeah.
And then Holland comes in and gets our consent
Mm.
to everything that is in the country package. So it's not, as far as they are concerned, they haven't imposed this country package. They haven't imposed this country package. We have agreed with it. And that's why I mentioned earlier, St. Martin has been kind of playing a little cat and mouse when this whole country package was being, only to accept it at the end of the day. And then on the basis of that, now you got these implementation
Mhm.
agendas. And again, it's not, no one has imposed that on us. They claim it is the matter of, and we have agreed that these things will happen. We have together agreed that these, and that St. Martin and Curacao and Aruba for that matter, are in charge of the process. No way is that so.
And you're paying for it too, so
Exactly,
it's
exactly.
all
And
yours.
and then you have the
That's funny.
temporary work organization. So I say, well,
Mhm.
we're fussing and we're saying, wait till the COHO comes to Parliament. But actually, that train has left the station. That train has left the station, from country package to implementation plans. Every quarter you're updating it, and where necessary adjusting it. And where you have now from BZK, you have a team
Mhm.
that is sort of the precursor for the COHO.
Mhm.
And
Wow.
that's on its way.
Mhm.
So anybody holding their heart and saying, well, we go take this cohort down when it comes to Parliament.
Because I mean, they've already done. You literally have seen advertising and
Yes.
everything,
In fact,
website and
in
Facebook
in
page.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. In fact, the there are two letters behind the whole operation of BZK and the TWO, and that is COHO IO, COHO in oprichting.
Mhm.
Is, so the COHO that is coming, that's basically what it means. IO.
You mentioned TWO.
Sorry,
That's the
TW, yeah, the temporary work
okay.
organization.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah. So another thing, I guess, kind of connected to that was what we've seen the recent constitutional court hearing regarding the
Yeah,
cuts in early
yeah.
benefits and so forth, tied
Mm-hmm.
to
Yeah.
the conditions that were placed among the COHO and among the the country package. What can you say about that, especially given the fact that and I see this based on a comment that the chairman of Parliament made on a Facebook comment,
Uh,
which was, well, it was something that was planned.
uh,
Basically, it was planned that Parliament would pass it,
wow.
knowing that, well, we'll take it to the Constitutional Court after.
The and Ralph, I have to mention, when you mentioned Constitutional Court, that this was one of the entities that St. Martin seen a little opening, and that time with our now governor and our former lieutenant governor, so Governor Holiday and former Lieutenant Governor Richardson,
Mhm.
we decided to put that in our constitution. But there was so much pushback against having a constitutional court. Long and short, but that too often we are seeing where the government, pressured or not, and it was also their proposal with these laws,
Mm.
would say, because you can circumvent the route via the ombudsman to the constitutional court. You can, if it is necessary, if it is urgent,
Mhm.
and it's a good thing. that members of parliament, including myself, insisted that although the Dutch were saying, no, those laws got to pass, they got to pass like yesterday. And we decided, no, but you're going to give the 6 weeks, because that's what you have to do, for the ombudsman to decide, and the rest is history. So to say that, well, we approve them because we figured that would have come, I don't think it does the process justice.
Okay. And so my final question for you would be, well, I may very well have to invite you back onto the program, but corporate governance. We noticed that of the airport has been quashed. I was hopefully not just for now, but a set of issue. But right now, GEBE is
I know, and that's
very precarious situation.
That is and that is so crazy when you have a government-owned company and the different stakeholders, the main players being the government, the shareholder, the supervisory board, and the management board. And we've seen where at different of our companies, these three or two of the three are going in complete opposite direction and doing this publicly. That is not serving our country well in terms of strength, Ralph. Again, they're like, but they're set a, I don't want to say crazy, but they are, and it is. And several years ago, a lot of work was done in order to structure the corporate structure of government-owned companies, but I think we're at a point now, especially given all that is happening globally and so, to look at that again, because this kind of relationship where the shareholder and the supervisory board, in a constant for the same company, and then to know that it's a government-owned company, it's but you're
like
right. That's a discussion on its own.
Because it's like finally, it's like we're handing the Netherlands another golden platter.
Yes, exactly. So I am waiting because I expect GB is going to start to play in the discussion/negotiations between the Netherlands and St. Martin. I honestly believe that. Every day I wake up, I say, what am I going to see now?
Country package, and the implementation agenda as well.
Yes, government-owned companies. Yes, correct.
And where energy is concerned and so
correct,
forth.
Correct.
So it's like we're just handing them a platter up.
I agree. It really weakens our position as a country, knowing what they want. You will always have politics. You'll always have a majority and opposition, and you'll always have persons in the community having their own opinion. All of that is good and well, but at the end, Ralph, we should be able to show as a country that we are critical, but we know where we want to go. We know where we want to go, and that's lacking.
Okay, so where does St. Martin want to go? A question to be answered sometime in the future. So thank you so much, MP Wescot.
A pleasure.
It was a pleasure having you on the program.
Thank you.
And to all our listeners, we'd like to thank you as well for watching and viewing. And do take care and see you again next episode. Okay, perfect.
Okay.